You're listening to Storytime in Paris on Paris Underground Radio. Since well before Victor Hugo looked up at Notre Dame and thought, what if a hunchback lived in there? Authors have been inspired by Paris. The Storytime in Paris podcast will help keep this tradition alive with interviews and readings from your favorite contemporary authors with a French connection. Every episode features 5 questions asked by you, our author's biggest fans, and answered live on air. Then our authors will treat us to a reading of an excerpt from their book. Who knows? Maybe you'll even be inspired to write your own great French novel. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity. Welcome back to another episode of Storytime in Paris. You may remember last season when I had a very special guest on for Halloween, Victor Hugo. The lovely and talented Eve Gallois was able to channel Victor for me so that I could interview him from beyond the grave. That episode was so fun and so enlightening that I thought I would ask Eve back on the show for another special occasion. Every year in France, and in at least another 20 countries, March 8th is International Women's Day. In honor of this day and of women everywhere, I decided to interview George Sand by way of Eve. Born Amantine Lucile Aurore Dupin, but better known by her pen name George Sand, Georges was a French romantic author who lived from 1804 to 1876 and wrote over 100 novels, plays, and essays. She was the most successful woman writer of her century and more popular than writers like Victor Hugo, Honoré de Balzac, Baudelaire and Gustave Flaubert. She was known for wearing pants in a time when women were forbidden by law to wear pants, cigar-smoking, divorcing her husband, and perhaps most scandalously, her public and plentiful love affairs. Without further ado, please allow me to introduce Eve Gallois and Georges Sand, author of The Devil's Pool. Hello, Eve. Thank you for joining me again.
My pleasure, Jenny.
How are you?
I feel very good, and I'm looking forward to having the best spring since a long time ago.
Yeah, it'd be nice to actually be able to go out and experience it.
Sure.
So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do and then how this works?
Okay, so I'm a life coach. I live in Alsace, at the German border of France. And in the techniques that I use, one is named parts work. It's based on Carl Jung principle that we have a shadow side, that we have an unconscious part that we can connect to. And there is another belief that we are all one. This means I am also you, you are also me, and I could be anyone. Which implies that I could channel the energy and the thoughts of whomever, living or dead, or vegetal, or animal, or rock on the planet. And this is what we're going to do.
And how does it work? Do you hear something or do you feel something? Does it just flow through you?
I would say it flows, as in I'm not trying to call someone like some mediums do. I'm not getting the energy from the outside. I'm pulling it from the inside. So I incarnate the character. I really feel what the character would feel if this person was doing the interview directly with you. I don't have access to specific memories because I specifically don't want to do any research so as to not influence what I feel from whatever comes up. So it's very interesting because I can also feel the body, the weight of my body that is different. I can feel the pain in some joints, for example, when I channel someone old. It's an experience that anyone could do if helped or trained properly, just to make sure you avoid any unwanted issue.
And last time we did this, you said that sometimes you were channeling and sometimes you were speaking as yourself.
Yes, indeed. Because sometimes the character the character doesn't want to say something but has a lot of feelings, so I can give you this input as Eve and I will tell you this is me speaking, and it will allow you to have a deeper insight into the feeling of the person and not just what they say. So you will be able to know beyond the words.
Fantastic. All right. So I think today we're going to channel Georges Sand.
Wonderful.
Have you done any research on Georges?
Uh, really, no. I've actually channeled George once for fun. So this is when I found out that La Mare au Diable was actually linked to a pot that is above the fire 24/7, and the one you always add vegetable sweet, so you have a perpetual stew.
Okay.
And I hadn't read the book. I just knew the title, and so someone asked about it, and I was like, "Yeah, I see a stew," and so that was it. But I really try not to dive into the characters so as not to influence what I'm going to tell you.
Okay. So are you ready?
I am ready. Let me just tune in, and I will tell you when you can start asking questions.
All right.
So this is Eve speaking. I feel very calm. I feel like I have a lot of density. I'm in this chair and I'm sitting there, like really sitting there. And I'm waiting for what's happening. I'm not stressed. I'm just observing, looking for the next ID to come up.
Well, hello. Bienvenue. Thank you for joining me.
My pleasure.
So, my first question, perhaps the most important first question, is I know that your given name is Amantine Lucile Aurore Dupin. I know your friends and family called you Aurore, but I know the world knows you as Georges. How would you like me to address you?
This is Eve speaking. When you started saying her actual name, I felt a lot of chills. Like this is it. It was sort of a bit scary. Like you were addressing a part of her that she does not want to show to just anyone. So I would say if you want to hear about her professional work, I would say maybe call her by her pen name. But if you want to know details about her life, her given name would be more appropriate. But at the same time, when I said if you want to know more about her life, she was like, "Not really. No. Let me be a public person."
Interesting. So, Georges, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you did?
Ah, I'm I'm a dreamer. I dream of something more, of something different. I like to challenge the beliefs of some stubborn old traditionalists. Um, I I like the freedom. I like the freedom of pants. Just say I like the freedom of pants. Oh God, if you've never worn pants, please try them. And I like to share bits, insights about life, things that you would maybe not touch if you've grown in cities or if you didn't have the same upbringing or family that I had. Uh, I'd like to open people's minds, showing them that there is something more available and that they need to reach for it. What do you want to reach for, Jen?
Me?
Yeah,
I mean, I think I'd also like to change the world, show people things they haven't seen before.
I love kindred spirits.
Excellent. Did you always want to be a writer? Were you writing from a young age?
This is Eve speaking. It's very, I've got a complicated time figuring out how to say this, but what I'm feeling is that she had the writing in her head before even knowing what writing was. She had the stories unroll, like really the ability to visualize a story in her mind. And I guess she's the kind of person that would read a book and see the story unrolling behind her eyes. So I would say it's a matter of through the nature of the writer, but not specifically as a job.
So I mentioned this before. Your given name is Amantine. Your family called you Aurore. You went by Georges. Do you think of these three people as three different personas, or are they all just nicknames for the same person?
I would say these are characters that you use depending on the situation. Aurore would never have been able to survive around these men. She would never have been published and would never have reached the influence that Georges could. And Amandine has more of a very calm, very sweet character. So she would have been crushed. She would never have done anything wrong by her family standards. So yeah, I guess Aurore, meaning dawn, was more in tune already of what I wanted to bring the world, a new dawn. And the new dawn was George.
So there's sort of like three, I guess, two layers covering. So the inner nugget is Amantine, and then covered by Aurore, and then externally Georges.
Maybe. I really didn't dive into this. Oh, this is naughty. I love that you give me ideas.
So I want to ask you a little bit more about identity. In your day and age, you were wearing clothing that was considered feminine and clothing that was considered masculine. And I know this was very scandalous since wearing pants as a woman was against the law. So you look very happy. My question is about gender identity and gender fluidity. In very recent times in my world right now, there's been this sort of universal opening. I wouldn't say we're open yet, but we're opening to this idea of gender fluidity. And now we use words like female identifying and male identifying and non-binary. What are your thoughts on gender identity and fluidity?
You must piss them old guys so much. Oh, this is wonderful. I'm crying. This is wonderful that you have the ability to define who you are, and that you don't have to fit yourself into the standards that were created by people long ago dead. Oh, I love this. Yes, I was very proud of rebelling against these notions that were so old and would not allow me to just express. It felt like I could not open my wings, but wearing pants I could, and I had the opportunity to go to places that a woman could not, and I got a respect from some of the most revolutionary minds at the time because I was daring compared to all these, I think the word is demure, compared to all these demure and meek women. I mean, I don't even know if I would call them women, because woman has this taste in your mouth that goes, woo. There's a notion of flying, that these women were just staying on the ground like chickens.
Yeah, keeping themselves down to fit into someone else's idea of what they should be.
Yeah, not knowing that something else was available beyond the fence.
Have you always dreamed of owning a place in Paris? If you're planning on moving, renting, buying, or selling a place in France, you'll need the expert guidance of Gail Boisclair and Marie Pistinier, hosts of the Paris Estate of Mind podcast. Listen now to Paris Estate of Mind on parisundergroundradio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be right back with Storytime in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now, back to Storytime in Paris. Victor Hugo, I read a quote from him about you.
Oh.
and he said he said many wonderful things about you, but one of the things that he said was, Georges Sand cannot determine whether she is male or female. I entertain a high regard for all my colleagues, but it is not my place to decide whether she is my sister or my brother.
Oh, it gives me chills.
Do you have any thoughts on that, on where you would put yourself in the spectrum?
Well, I guess if a writer was a gender, I would take this as a gender. And would I call myself human without the notion of gender? Maybe, but there is something more. I would even define myself as more than human, more in the mind than the average human that I know. I'm a thought person. Yes, writer is my gender.
And does that mean that you didn't feel particularly connected to your body, or that you did? Were you just in your mind, or were they one thing?
This body, I'm feeling a bit too connected to it. Periods. Oh. Oh. I feel a bit jealous of the men who have no idea what we have to go through. Actually, I'm just connecting to the thoughts of Eve here, and this hormonal system, which explains a lot. I'm so envious of the people who have the freedom of doing anything, and if this body is hindering my ability to do stuff. But I have to admit that the female skin is a bit softer, and it is an advantage. It's a good point.
So for people who may be unfamiliar with your work, where would you suggest that they start? Do you have something, a book or an idea that is closest to your heart?
I would say, whatever the book you take, go to a place that you like to read it. Do not just read the book in whatever setting. Be with the book. Be with the book like a lover. Sit under a tree on a nice spring day. Feel the sun on your face. And make love to the words. This is how I feel a book needs to be read and needs to be experienced.
Excellent. So along those same lines, you were, I think, lucky enough to live in a time with really excellent literary contemporaries. People like Victor Hugo and Honoré de Balzac, Charles Baudelaire, Gustave Flaubert. How did they influence you, and what was it like to live in a world where they were your contemporaries?
Hard. So many beautiful minds. There was this notion of race, but as not as a race, skin or whatever. There was this notion of racing minds, and we had to win at some point. It was always a challenge, maybe more like a gentleman's club challenge. Like we could almost bet on who was going to do the best, next best thing. And it was a permanent race towards the beauty of words, the beauty of the mind. And the male ego is soft. It's delicate, let's say. The male ego is delicate, and you need to be very careful with what you do. So it was wonderful. Actually, this is Eve speaking. I don't remember which was the second name that you gave.
Balzac?
If the second one was Balzac, actually I had a bit of chills at the second name and not at any other ones. So I don't know.
Or Baudelaire?
No, Baudelaire. Actually, when you said Baudelaire, the feeling was like, meh. Like there was maybe if it was like in a schoolyard, she would have her BFFs, and some of them were of similar minds. Some others were good, but there was no connection there. So yeah, that was it.
Interesting. So a lot has been made of your love affair with Frédéric Chopin, but I also gather that it didn't end well.
But it was hot. Whew. Chopin. Whew.
So was it really as great a love story as it was made out to be, and do you regret how it ended?
Was it as great a love story as it was made to be? I don't know who made what of it, but it was a story worthy of a book. It was a story worthy of people writing a book together. It was a connection of mind and body and spirit, and a wonderful game of life. Yes, that was it. Now, about how it ended. Um, I re- I'm sad that it ended like this. Bit of regrets, but no remorse. But like every book, every story has to end so we can start the other one. So you can't just live on one book for your whole life. And you can't just wish that you would stay on this page, on this moment of the story forever. We all change, it's sad, but it's the only way that we can create a new. But it was hot. It was so hot.
Anything you feel like sharing?
No.
You famously did not attend his funeral, but there is a rumor that you made a last minute visit to his deathbed. Is that true?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
This is Eve speaking. I've got tears coming up. Like, I have a feeling that it was a matter of public image. Like, being there would not have been good for the family and for the work of the artist himself. So it was the best option to not attend.
Okay. So, are there any secrets or misconceptions about you that we have now that you wish people knew the truth about?
Secrets there are. I would like people to know these, but it's not possible. There are people that want to protect the image of the writer, and that would not even, maybe they actually know already, but they are keeping this because it would have a negative influence on the work. This is the issue, separating the author, the person, from the work, because so often we have prejudice about the person, so we disregard the work, or vice versa, and so much is lost because of this. Now, this is Eve. Let me check for a moment if I can get something. There is something about children, about not wanting children. I wonder if George Sand was actually child-free in her spirits. She was actually an eternal child in her mind, as in the innocence. And I think there was a movie made named the Children of the Century, something like this, or Century Child. And in her mind, George was always this child exploring the world and never feeling old, even if her body aged. She always had the curious mind of a child. Motherhood there could not fit, because you could not ask a child to be a mother at the same time. I actually don't know if she had children. So
She did. She had two.
oh, well, actually I felt two. I wondered why, but okay. So yeah. It's really motherhood was difficult, a difficult step, and it broke a part of her, and it's a guilt around being broken because you love this little human so much, but at the same time you don't love what they did to your life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it would have driven me as Eve mad. Maybe let me check with George. Actually, it didn't turn George mad between being a mother and being the child explorer, but the standards were complicated. The expectations of society, and maybe without children, it would have been completely different, and the love would have happened till the very last second, the very last breath.
So in 2003, there was talk of moving you to the pension. And apparently this was very controversial and it didn't happen. Do you have any thoughts on whether you would?
Oh, I feel rage. Like, why put me with all these old bearded men? Why? Why? Why put me there? Why revere me? Why put me on a pedestal while all I want is that you find out that you could do as much as I did in my time? So the references have changed. I see that, but you could be as revolutionary in your life as I have been in my life and in my time. And I don't want to be stuck between polished stones. Just oh, it pisses me off. Really, really. I want. I would like that people could walk around a pond and stop by a tree and think about me there in the openness, in the life of something that is not stuck, something that is always moving and evolving, that's all interconnected. I like the ever changing. Oh, I'm still pissed. I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to make you angry.
It's not you, it's them. Ah, men, always men. I'm sure that's it. I'm sure.
Well, you might be unhappy to know that we still have similar problems with men today.
Wear more pants.
I'm wearing pants, don't you worry. In your honor.
Thank you. Please go on.
So I just have one final question for you. Is there anything, if we could remember one thing about you and how you lived, what would you like that to be?
Well, there are two things. There is the candlelight over a book and the scent of paper and the sound of pages turning. And at the same time, there is this a pear tree, and sitting under this pear tree with a loved one, a lover preferably, and just being there, connected and connected to the rest, and just being, enjoying life till it lasts. That's it. Yes, remember me like this. Remember me under a tree bearing fruit and picking the fruit of lives.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Are you searching for spiritual guidance? The Heart of You podcast is an exploration into your soul through intuition, spirituality, divination, and unconditional love. Host Annette DeLu is a spiritual guidance coach, intuitive, Akashic, and tarot reader who discusses practical ways to integrate spiritual growth into your everyday life. Listen now to The Heart of You on ParisUndergroundRadio.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. And now, back to Storytime in Paris. So, as George suggested, I'm going to curl up in my favorite spot and read to you from her book, The Devil's Pool. Chapter 11, The Belle of the Village. And after all, when he had brushed the dust of travel from his clothes and from his horse's harness, when he had mounted the gray, and when he had learned the road, he felt that there was no retreat and that he must forget that anxious night as though it had been a dangerous dream. He found Father Leonard seated on a trim bench of spinach green. The 6 stone steps leading up to the door showed that the house had a cellar. The walls of the garden and of the hemp field were plastered with lime and sand. It was a handsome house, and might have almost been mistaken for the dwelling of a bourgeois. Germain's future father-in-law came forward to meet him, and having plied him for 5 minutes with questions concerning his entire family, he added that conventional phrase with which one passerby addresses another concerning the object of his journey. "So, you are taking a little trip in this part of the country?" "I have come to see you," replied the husbandman, "to give you this little present of game with my father's compliments, and to tell you from him that you ought to know with what intentions I come to your house." "Oh ho!" said Father Leonard, laughing and tapping his capacious stomach. "I see, I understand. I am with you. And," he added with a wink, "you will not be the only one to pay your court, young man. There are 3 already in the house dancing attendants like you. I never turn anybody away, and I should find it hard to say yes or no to any of them, for they are all good matches. Yet, on account of Father Maurice and for the sake of the rich fields you till, I hope that it may be you. But my daughter is of age and mistress of her own affairs. She will do as she likes. Go in and introduce yourself. I hope that you will draw the prize." "I beg your pardon," answered Germain, amazed to find himself an extra when he had counted on being alone in the field. "I was not aware that your daughter was supplied already with suitors, and I did not come to quarrel over her." "If you suppose that because you were slow in coming my daughter would be left unprovided for, you were greatly mistaken, my son," replied Father Leonard, with unshaken good humor. "Catherine has the wherewithal to attract suitor, and her only difficulty lies in choosing. But come on in, don't lose heart. The woman is worth a struggle." And pushing in Germain by the shoulders with boisterous gaiety, he called to his daughter as they entered the house. "So, Catherine, here is another." This cordial but unmannerly method of introduction to the widow, in the presence of her other devotees, completed Germain's distress and embarrassment. He felt the awkwardness of his position, and stood for a few moments without daring to look upon her beauty and her court. The widow Guérin had a good figure, and did not lack freshness, but her expression and her dress displeased Germain the instant he saw her. She had a bold, self-satisfied look, and her cap, edged with 3 lace flounces, her silk apron, and her fichu of fine black lace were little in accord with the staid and sober widow he had pictured to himself. Her elaborate dress and forward manners inclined Germain to judge the widow old and ugly, although she was certainly not either. He thought that such finery and playful manners might well suit little Marie's years and wit, but that the widow's fun was labored and overbold, and that she wore her fine clothes in bad taste. The 3 suitors were seated at a table loaded with wines and meats which were spread out for their use throughout the Sunday morning, for Father Leonard liked to show off his wealth, and the widow was not sorry to display her pretty china and keep a table like a rich lady. Germain, simple and unsuspecting as he was, watched everything with a penetrating glance, and for the first time in his life he kept on the defensive when he drank. Father Leonard obliged him to sit down with his rivals, and taking a chair opposite he treated him with great politeness, and talked to him rather than to the others. The presence of game, despite the breach Germain had made on his own account, was still plenteous enough to produce its effect. The widow did not look unaware of his presence, and the suitors cast disdainful glances in its direction. Germain felt ill at ease in this company, and did not eat heartily. Father Leonard poked fun at him. "You look very melancholy," he said, "and you are ill-using your glass. You must not allow love to spoil your appetite, for a fasting lover can make no such pretty speeches as he whose ideas are brightened with a drop of wine." Germain was mortified at being thought already in love, and the artificial manner of the widow, who kept lowering her eyes with a smile as a woman does who is sure of her calculations, made him long to protest against his pretended surrender. But fearing to appear uncivil, he smiled and held his peace.
Whew. That was nice.
Yeah? So this, when you were channeling Victor Hugo, you stopped many times to tell me what he wasn't saying. You did that far less here. Is it because she was very forthcoming?
Yes, she was. I think it's a difference between male and female. You just are more open when you feel confident and that you trust the person that you're chatting with. So she felt really at ease. You were her kindred spirit there, and she felt accepted. She felt seen. So she didn't have to hide anything. And I have a feeling that she was her dream was to be extremely authentic, but that society didn't let her be her true self through and through. So once she was allowed not to hide, why would she?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if you have to scream so loud, look at me, listen to me, look at me, listen to me, then you can't just be who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other insights to share about the experience for you?
I actually didn't know about her gender fluidity, so it was very interesting to find this out. And I think I would have loved the person. Maybe she would have been a bit too much, because what you've heard here seems relatively normal in our current society, but her strength of opinion must have annoyed people so much, and she was so proud of annoying them.
It's funny, we were talking about Baudelaire before, and you said that she was like, oh, meh. He apparently did not, he called her a slut. He like said all sorts of terrible things about her.
Yeah. She when you said Baudelaire, the feeling was uptight, and he felt in the terms of color he was very gray, as in not colorful, not fun, just bland.
That's very funny. Excellent. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Always a pleasure. I really enjoyed doing that, because when you can yourself connect to these people, you can find more about them and really connect to their soul, to their thoughts, and understand why they did all that they did publicly, and that you have access to, but you never have the true context of it. And there you have it. And so I really wish that children could learn how to do that, and to just connect directly to their favorite authors and singers and whatever, and really feel the spirit of the person, and maybe then want to be as free, as revolutionary, and as bitchy as them.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Huge thank yous again to Eve for being such a joy to speak with, and for conducting this interview in a second language, all while channeling. Please join me next week when my guest will be award-winning author Rebecca Rosenberg. Check back next week to see if your questions have been answered and to hear a reading from her book, Champagne Widows. Thank you for listening to Storytime in Paris. If you liked this episode, please consider leaving a rating or review and subscribe so you never miss another episode. I'm your host, Jennifer Garrity, and you can find me on all socials at Jennyphoria. That's JennyPhoria, and on my website, jennyphoria.com. Storytime in Paris is produced by me as part of the Paris Underground Radio Podcast Network. To check out interviews with previous guests, or to discover more great Paris-based podcasts, please visit parisundergroundradio.com. This episode of Storytime in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.